Welcome. We are so glad that you tuned in today for the GrapeSEED sponsored webinar, Engaging Every Learner, Multiple Modalities in Language Acquisition. I'm Jennifer McDonald, the Training and Implementation Manager for GrapeSEED. We know that engaging our students in learning can sometimes be a challenge. Today, Julie Baxa is going to talk about incorporating multiple modalities in your classroom. This is an effective instructional strategy to actively involve students in their learning. You will learn to infuse joy and confidence in all students by presenting content using a variety of modalities. Julie has over 20 years of elementary classroom teaching experience, including having been a reading recovery teacher. She is currently a professional learning specialist and supports GrapeSEED teachers in their journey to help students develop oral language as a bridge to reading and writing. She is also working towards her PhD in reading and language arts. With that being said, I would like to introduce you to Julie Baxa.
Thanks, Jen, for that nice introduction. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone, and thanks for watching our webinar today on incorporating multiple modalities into your lessons for language acquisition. Let's begin by looking at what we'll learn about today. First, we'll start with what are multiple modalities so that we're all on the same page with what they are. And then we'll jump right into explaining how you can incorporate several modalities into each one of your oral language lessons. So let's jump right in with what are multiple modalities. Using multiple modalities is an instructional practice that's used to improve student outcomes, including student engagement and learning. It involves providing diverse presentations and experiences of the content so that students use different senses as they learn, and they're practicing different skills during a single lesson. Often multiple modalities address different learning styles and allow students to experience learning in many different ways. A quick check online will yield a variety of versions of multiple modalities, including this version, which includes 3 separate modalities, including visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic body or tactile learners. Sometimes you'll see another version which consider tactile and kinesthetic modalities completely separate from one another, like this version which separates kinesthetic and tactile, kinesthetic being moving your body and tactile being touching different objects that you're learning about. Or you might find this version which includes hearing, speaking, writing, seeing, and reading, which is 5 modalities if you're counting at this point. And finally, we have Howard Gardner's work on multiple intelligences, which asserts that there are actually 8 modalities or intelligences, including interpersonal, or being smart about other people, intrapersonal, or being self-aware, linguistic, which includes both reading and writing, or being word smart, logical, mathematical, which of course includes using your logic and having smarts in math, the nature smart or naturalistic smart, as well as spatial, which includes using pictures to learn, a bodily kinesthetic intelligence or modality, which includes moving your body and that tactile sense as well. They're combined in this intelligence session. And then also the musical sense, which includes music. And so the version that you use is completely up to you, but the point really is that the more ways that we can present information to our students using these modalities, the more likely our students are to learn, remember, and be able to apply the knowledge that we're teaching. As you can see from the picture, if we're teaching with a single modality, we're going to be helping students make connections and forming dendrites. But if we are able to teach a lesson using multiple modalities, then we're able to make many more connections for our students. And that, of course, will result in increased student outcomes. Keeping in mind our goal of language acquisition, our job as teachers is to help students build independence, of course, with oral language. And so when we're planning our lessons, we need to keep that end goal in mind. And it might help us to think about how we will use each of these modalities with the teaching tools that we have to help students acquire language. And so looking at this gradual release of responsibility model of building independence, we see that teachers have the majority of responsibility at the beginning of lessons, and then over time, that responsibility will shift to teacher and student shared responsibility during guided instruction and a collaborative work time. And finally, students being responsible to be independent with what we're trying to teach them. In this case, oral language, and being able to use the language outside of the teaching components and be able to use it independently. So as we're selecting text that we want to use to teach oral language, whether it be songs or stories, chants, or action activities, we need to be very intentional about the text that we choose. If our primary goal, again, is language acquisition, we want to choose texts that have language that the students need to acquire. So we want to choose texts that have consistent language patterns. Maybe a language pattern is taught in a song and a story and a chant, and thereby the boys and girls are seeing how language can be used flexibly and in different ways. We want to choose texts that build patterns across text and across units so that language is building on itself over time, and we're using students' prior knowledge. And of course, we'll want to also choose texts where children are able to practice intonation and expression and fluency in order to be able to transfer those strategies into conversations with others. So how do we do that? Well, let's begin first with the gift of music, or that musical sense. One way to teach oral language expressions or content area knowledge to children and make them meaningful and memorable is through the gift of music. As we know, putting words to a tune increases engagement, it lowers the affective filter, and it reaches students who are auditory and musical learners. And I'll talk a little bit more about the affective filter in just a few minutes. Research shows that music crosses over to both sides of the brain, allowing for increased learning of oral language patterns, as well as content knowledge that children can then use in other academic language areas. And so advertisers have known this for many years, and that's why they put their products into a jingle. For example, if I sing this jingle, I'm sure you'll be able to finish it. Give me a break, break me off a piece of that. How many of you said Kit Kat bar? I'd be willing to guess that most, if not all of you did, because music helps us remember language. It helps make those connections in our brain so that we're able to use the language and remember it. Whether it be the name of a product or an oral language expression or pattern, or even vocabulary, we want our students to be able to learn and use on their own. So let me give you a few examples about using songs and music. Here is a song called I Love Them All. In this song, the goal is for students to be able to use the language pattern, this is my, and let me sing it for you. I love them all. This is my father, this is my mother, this is my brother tall, this is my sister, this is the baby, oh how I love them all. So again, through singing the song, boys and girls will learn the language pattern, this is my. But in order to build independence with that pattern, first we have to model for our students over and over and over. Then we'll share in singing the song. And finally, we'll provide lots of experiences for students to be able to use that language, both within the song and on their own in conversation. And remember, another goal when we're selecting text is that we want to build patterns across texts and units. So we might also want to use another teaching component where language builds on this expression, like this one in the song Early in the Morning. It goes like this. This is the way we wash our face, wash our face, wash our face. This is the way we wash our face early in the morning. So now we've taken this is my and we've extended it out a little bit. And now we have this is the way we. And so boys and girls can add on to that prior knowledge and extend it just a little bit. We can also then move on to chants that turn the expression into a question. What is this? Is this a blank? So now we've moved from an expression, a statement, into being able to ask and answer questions, and all the while building on those language patterns that we've already taught. So in summary, using songs can help lower that affective filter, making language easier to learn and acquire. So I've mentioned the affective filter a few times. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about that. One goal that we have as teachers is to create a classroom environment, of course, where children feel comfortable and want to learn. As you may know, Stephen Krushen has a term that describes children's emotions in class, and this is called the student's affective filter. Our goal as teachers is to lower that affective filter. In this case on the screen, that would be down in the green area. The affective filter is also called children's emotions or their stress levels. And we know when children's emotions are high or they're feeling a lot of anxiety, they are having a much harder time learning. So if we can lower that affective filter, learning language and acquiring language will become much easier. So let's take a look at using the kinesthetic modality, or what I call let's get moving, to help lower students' affective filter and help students acquire language. In the upcoming video, you'll notice that in addition to the use of music, the students will get up and move their body, thus allowing for a small bottom break, which of course all children and adults need. I know I do. But more importantly, the boys and girls will acquire language at the same time. And while you're watching this video, you'll want to watch for the boy in the front row in the red and black hoodie. He's only been in the United States a very short time and knows very little English, but is able to participate by watching his teacher and the other children and using the tune as a support. So let's watch and see how music and movement, or that kinesthetic modality, helps lower his affective filter and will help him learn language over time, just as his classmates have. probably noticed that the boys and girls learned lots of directional words during that action activity, like up and down, left and right, in and out, around and around, all while engaging in that kinesthetic modality and through, of course, the musical modality as well. So while participating in these fun, meaningful movements, students will acquire language over time, and that helps lower their affective filters as well. So if you were counting the modalities that were used in this action activity, there was musical, there was kinesthetic, there was linguistic, there were spatial intelligences or modalities, and also visual. So definitely a multiple modalities activity. The research behind this activity comes from James Asher's work on total physical response, or TPR. TPR says that we should encourage comprehension before production. Students should be given lots and lots of time to be able to understand language before they're able and expected to be able to use it. TPR also says that we should allow students to learn through movement, that students should be given lots of opportunities to get up and move their bodies or act out language as a means to understanding it. And finally, TPR also says that acquisition is what is preferred over language learning. And what's the difference? The difference is that language that's acquired can be used in daily conversations, where language that's learned is often just memorized in lists. In the video you just saw, these three components were particularly evidenced by the new student who was able to participate and was learning to comprehend, even though he may not have been able to say or produce any of the words quite yet. Grammar is complex, and this diagram looks very complex because it is. This goes back to that learning about language type of learning where we're focusing on grammar and memorizing. And this is not helpful for language acquisition at all. In fact, it might be how you learned a second language in high school, a language that you may not have gotten very much practice actually speaking, and you may not remember very much of it today. Instead of learning about language and memorizing, our goal as teachers is to help children acquire language and be able to use it. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather learn language and acquire language like this than like this. Because Asher's TPR also says that acquisition should be fun, which you could see in the video. It was very obvious that those boys and girls were acquiring language and they were having fun at the same time. Another example of kinesthetic movement to help us learn is using air writing to teach students their letters and the formation as well as the sounds of the letters. Students can learn to air write letters and use those gross motor or kinesthetic modality along with oral language and learn how to write the letter in the air before they learn how to write it on paper. So let's watch a quick video of air writing letters and sounds. So in that video, you probably noticed a preschool 4-year-old helping her teacher to lead the air writing of the letter E. But of course, we don't want to just present isolated letters and sounds. We'll always want to go back and make sure that we show children how those letters and sounds are useful in words, and then again in continuous text, which is what the teacher was going to do next. In addition to getting up and moving our bodies, we want children to be able to touch and feel the things that they're learning about. We want to give students the opportunity to build and manipulate materials independently at centers during choice time, playtime, or work time. And this could especially be accomplished to help children with letters and sounds and reinforce their learning in an age-appropriate, child-friendly way through tactile learning opportunities. So let's look at a few examples. Maybe students are making letters in the sand and saying the sounds as they do it. Or maybe they're matching letters to a chart and they're finding those letters buried in the snow. Or practicing phonemic and phonological awareness by painting or using clay to form letters, and then also saying the sounds of the letter as they're making it. Also, we might take some time to build some words out of clay, high frequency words, and we'll want to make sure that we keep the continuous text or poem or story near the boys and girls as they're working, so that they're reminded about why these things are important, not just learning isolated skills. We also use the tactile experiences to help build vocabulary and prior knowledge. This little girl has shoes that are too big and too small in the dress-up area to help her learn about comparison words, and it goes along with a story that we'll see a sampling of in just a few minutes called Too Big, Too Small. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about using real-life objects today. That's also called realia. And the purpose is to help build background and also comprehension. Realia is the topic of an entire webinar conducted by Jody Schell that you can see by going to GrapeSEED.com. On our website, you can find that webinar, a recording of it, and watch it at your leisure. Jody provides detailed examples and tips for teachers to begin incorporating realia into their lessons, and I hope that you'll take a little bit of time and check it out. It's pretty cool. I would be remiss to talk about oral language acquisition and not talk about the interpersonal intelligence or modality. This idea of being interpersonal requires boys and girls to interact with others and combines both receptive language and productive language into interactive language. Receptive language being the idea of listening to others and understanding what they say, while productive language, of course, is being able to produce language so that others can understand your message. The ultimate goal of oral language acquisition, of course, is the combination of these in interactive language so that we can have conversations with others and interact with others. In our classrooms, we need to give students lots of opportunity for this conversation and to talk to each other. So today, I'm going to talk about two different ways that we as teachers can incorporate talk and conversation into our lessons. The first is called Think, Pair, Share, or Turn and Talk. Think, Pair, Share begins with boys and girls sitting eye to eye and knee to knee so that they can practice the conversation skill of looking at the person that they're talking to. This strategy encourages children to talk to a friend, so that productive language, but it also really encourages them to listen to their friends' ideas, that idea of receptive language. Because when children share out at the end of the activity, they'll share their friend's idea, not their own. So children must learn how to restate or summarize what a friend said, again, building lots of oral language. So if you're not familiar with Think, Pair, Share, the steps go like this. Number one, we're going to teach children to turn to look at their friend and set eye to eye and knee to knee. Then each student will take a turn to discuss whatever topic we're talking about today. And finally, students will turn back to face the front and then share with the class their partner's idea. Another opportunity for conversation comes with an activity called the sticky note storm. And this activity, like the previous one, incorporates multiple modalities. This one incorporates oral language and writing. And so a sticky note storm can be used really effectively with students who are in first grade and up. But it can also be used with kindergartners who might be non-writers because they can draw a picture to ensure successful participation. So how does a sticky note storm work? Well, the teacher asks an open-ended question with many possible answers and gives the children a couple of minutes to think, depending on their age, and also to write. So students are brainstorming as many ideas as they can by writing one idea on each sticky note and then putting them in the middle of the table. I really recommend that you use a different color sticky note for each person at the table or in the group, because when the time is up and students have time to share, it's very easy to get back their own sticky notes. If they're all the same color, sometimes that can become tricky. So let's say, for example, that we wanted to brainstorm lots of ways that we could ask a friend to play with us. So on each sticky note, we might write one idea of what to say, like, will you play with me on one sticky note, or want to play tag on another sticky note, or do you want to build a house with me, etc. This is a great activity to combine, again, those modalities of writing and oral language. And you could also mix in some math if you wanted to brainstorm ways to make 10, for example, or science concepts by brainstorming all of the reptiles you know, or all of the things that you know about birds, for example. So both of these activities are really good for getting conversation started with our students. As we saw at the beginning of the presentation, some models include reading and writing modalities, or as Howard Gardner calls it, the linguistic intelligence. He combines them into one intelligence or modality. As we build a strong oral language foundation with our boys and girls, that foundation will help them to build a bridge to reading and writing. So let's consider how we might use multiple modalities in conjunction with stories. First of all, a little research. Dr. Roscoe and her colleagues at the National Association of Educating Young Children have told us something, of course, that we probably already know, that young children need writing to help them learn about reading. They need reading to help them learn about writing, and they need oral language to help them learn about both. And of course, we're, very well aware of that reciprocity between reading and writing, but sometimes if our students don't have that oral language foundation, reading and writing become even more difficult. So what are some things that we can do with stories that will help our students with their oral language? This is a sample of a story called Mice in the Barn. And as I read the first few pages to you, I want you to think about the language that children might learn from this story. In the box, out of the box, through the hole, down the tree, around the snake, through the trees, around the rock, through the grass, up the steps, to the door, at the door. So that's just a small snippet of the beginning of the story. But again, you probably noticed words like around, up, at, to, and through that boys and girls will learn in this story. Occasionally, we might want to give children practice with using the language that occurs in our stories. In this video, the teacher took the language from the story and asked children to use that kinesthetic modality and act out movements, as well as giving children the opportunity to use the language, so their linguistic ability, as they acted out each portion of the story. So let's take a look at this quick video. So you probably noticed again all of that same language that you just saw in the previous story. And the teacher simply took those same words and made a little obstacle course for the children to act out or use that kinesthetic modality. And we know that these skills are so important as positional words that are necessary for beginning math skills. So again, a great way to learn oral language and also make an extension from a story that you may have read. Keeping in mind our goals of intentional selection of text to build particular oral language patterns and expressions, as well as building independence, let's take a look at a couple of pages from the story Too Big, Too Small. Hello, Miss Hippopotamus. You have a nice sweater, but I cannot wear it. Your shoulders are too big. Hello, Miss Turtle. You have a nice hat, but I cannot wear it. Your head is too small. So again, you probably noticed the use of words and phrases that help students compare the sizes of body parts. Again, comparison of size is such an important skill in math and in science, and being able to use this language in conversation and understand it is critical. So let's take a quick look at a video of a teacher who uses a prop. She uses Marvin Monkey to get her students to use the language from the story Too Big, Too Small with her prop.
Hello, Marvin. You have nice gloves. I cannot wear them. Your hands are small. Hello, Marvin. You have a nice cap. I cannot wear it.
So again, the students were given the opportunity to use that language outside of the story and be able to have a quote unquote conversation with Marvin Monkey and become independent with using comparison words and also different clothing pieces. And you might have also noticed that the teacher recast the students' words and stopped to allow some opportunities for students to add on to what they said or possibly even self-correct during her recasting. Another opportunity to combine modalities with stories is when you're teaching children to sequence or retell and adding in some movement. So we might consider having actual pictures of pages from the text that students can move around as they learn to sequence stories. This gives students the opportunity to use the pictures as support while physically manipulating the pages. It also combines that kinesthetic modality with the literacy skills of sequencing and retelling. It includes that spatial intelligence or spatial modality, as well as the linguistic intelligence or linguistic modality. So let's think about writing a little bit. Again, as we build that strong oral language foundation, it will help build this bridge to writing. And so using the gradual release of responsibility model with writing that I talked about at the very beginning will help our students feel successful as they build language. Often our students don't know how to get started or what to write, and so using a mentor text will help them get started. So how does this work? Well, begin with multiple readings where you as the teacher model. So for example, we might read this poem, Monkey. Little monkey, high up in the tree, please come down and play with me. After reading multiple repetitions or exposures to this poem, students will be able to read it on their own. So first you'll model, then you'll read along with them. Eventually they'll be able to do it on their own independently. Once that happens, you'll want to capitalize on this new knowledge during writing time and use the poem as a mentor text in writing. So you might model reading the poem first, and then model thinking aloud about another animal that you know about, like bears, for example. And in front of your students, you'll model writing a new poem using what you know about bears and where they live, and giving students a process for using a mentor text. After you've modeled this for your boys and girls several times, you might write a new poem with your boys and girls. So now we're going to move on to guided practice. And since your teaching point is about composing thoughts and not actually writing words on paper, but thoughts, you may want to control the pen during this guided writing. And in this situation, you'll provide opportunities for boys and girls to talk about an animal that they know about and brainstorm how to use the monkey poem again as mentor text. So together you might write about a snake and where the snake lives. Little snake down in the grass, please come out and play with me. The goal is that over time, you want to move your students towards independently writing their own poems. Like this. This poem was written by Michaela. She was a first grader and she wrote about tigers. Little tiger running in the grass. Please come over and play with me. So today I've talked a lot about using multiple modalities and the idea of moving from using a single modality to dual modalities and really concentrating and being intentional about using multiple modalities in our lessons. And so what can you do? You can really think and be intentional about your lesson planning and how to include multiple modalities to help make more connections for students as they acquire language. And this will definitely help them as they become a reader and a writer as well. I've included a couple of citations if you want to get more information about using multiple modalities, and also if you want more information on total physical response, or TPR, from James Asher. If you have any other questions that you'd like answered, please feel free to contact me at julie.baxa@grapeseed.com, and I'm happy to help with whatever I can. Thanks so much for watching our webinar today, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jen.
Thanks, Julie, for sharing how teachers can engage every learner by using multiple modalities. And once again, we would like to thank everyone for tuning in. Have a fantastic day.